a deep dive on building landing pages. So I'm super excited to get this started. We'll go ahead and hit play and we'll see you in a little bit. If you have any questions, make sure that you put them in the chat so we can be sure to get those answered for you after the video.
First, I just wanted to give a special thanks to Brittany Postma for inviting me to be a part of the Svelte Sirens event today. So I'm very excited to be here and excited to share some of the things that I've learned along the way as I've built some of these custom landing pages. So my name is Amy Dutton. I'm the Director of Design at Zeal. I co-host a podcast called Compressed FM with James Q. Quick, and I also run a YouTube channel called Self Teach Me. So I'd appreciate it if you'd check out both of those. So the two landing pages that we're going to be focusing on today are the advent of JavaScript and the advent of CSS. So both of these landing pages were launched last November, and they were used to deliver 24 challenges during the month of December. So the idea is that you could sign up and get access to one challenge every day during the month of December leading up to Christmas, or you could also pay to receive the solutions to those challenges. So today we're going to be talking about some of those advanced landing page techniques and some of the tech that I used alongside Svelte and Svelte Kit. We'll also talk about the layout and some of the components that I built and some of the tricks that I learned there. We'll also talk about how to manage content through MD Specs and some of the tips and tricks I learned along the way. So I'm excited to jump into the code. You can access it through GitHub. It is all open source, so we'll be sure to include a link. So here is the advent of CSS landing page that I put together. You can see I have a little bit of snow in the background, and we'll talk about how I created that in a minute. But here's the information about the 3 different tiers, some information about how it works and who I am. And then here I have a grid of 24 different images to represent those 24 different challenges, some frequently asked questions, and these expand and collapse using Svelte's built-in transitions and animations. And then here at the bottom, I have the tiers listed again. So let's scroll up to the top. And the other thing I wanted to point out is if you go to adventofjavascript.com or adventofjs, they both go to the same place. There is a similar landing page. The only difference is the color palette is different, but you'll see the components look very similar. It has James's face instead of mine since he created the videos for this particular piece. And it's really using the exact same components, just a different color palette, and then some different art elements. Okay, so I'm going to close this out and let's jump over to the code. And I have the Advent of CSS project open. I'm going to type npm run dev just to get everything up and running locally. Now here I have my source folder, and inside we'll jump into the routes and take a look at the index page. And you'll notice that I have a component for each section of the site. So it's pretty straightforward at this point. But one of the things that you might notice is that I have a $ components. So I did this by setting up an alias. And the advantage here is that I could actually move these pages around if I needed to create additional structure, but it's still going to point to the components file. So in order to do that, you actually have to set this up in 2 different places. The first place is within the svelte.config.js file. So if I jump over here, you'll see that under Vite, I have listed as an alias, and I have one set up for my components, my routes, and my utilities. And they're referencing the folder. So the second place is under my tsconfig.js file. And here under paths, I have one set up for my routes, my components, and my utils again. And you'll notice that I actually have 2 set up for each different folder. So one that includes a wildcard and one that does not. So you may have to restart VS Code in order for it to recognize these things, but this has proved pretty helpful as I'm developing. Okay, let's actually jump back over to my index.svelte file, and we can look at some of the components that I've created. So let's take a look at my header component. Now here at the top, I'm importing a few images. Then I have a section here for my HTML. That's where I have all the main code. And then down here, I have my style block, just as you would expect. Now, the thing that's interesting here is I am using Sass. And the main reason that I reached for Sass is I really like being able to nest. So actually, if I scroll down to the very bottom of my file, you'll see that I have a span here nested inside of my H4. So that's nice. Instead of having to type out span H4 like so, I can just nest that particular element. And personally, I just find that more readable than the alternative, and it lets me just see at a quick glance that that span is related to that H4. Now, the way that you can use SAS within your project is through Svelte pre-process. So if we jump back over to Chrome, I'll pull this up really quick, but you can pull open this Svelte pre-process package. And what that does is it allows you to run PostCSS, SAS, Less, Stylus, CoffeeScript, any of these after the fact. The only thing that you have to do in order to get this to work once you've installed the package is to pull up your svelte.config.js file again. And this time we're going to have a pre-process option. And here I have this pre-process method being called. Another nice piece about using SAS is that you can use SAS variables. So here under my styles folder, I actually have some breakpoints listed out, and you'll notice that this does have the SAS extension. And here I'm just listing out what those min widths are for each of my breakpoints. So if we look at in the header file, you'll notice here at the top of this style block, I am importing that breakpoints.sas file. And then I'm able to reference it here within, say, my media query, and I'm just calling that $tablet. So I found that to be really useful. The other thing that you may notice as you scroll down, you might see some color references. So here for this H1, I'm referencing this color, or for the font family, I'm referencing the Strange Tales font. So I did do a little mix between SAS variables and CSS variables or properties. And so the way that the CSS properties are being called are through my layout.svelte file. And here within the style block, I have my import for my font. And then here I have a couple of custom fonts that are running. And then here I've defined all my color variables, typography variables, and some variables around the grid and page width. So this made it really easy to be able to reference within each of my components. And you'll notice that because this is in the layout.svelte file, I actually don't have to import anything into my header component in order for it to work. But I am importing that SAS file for those SAS variables to work. So that's one of the differences there. Yeah, so while we still have this file open, I wanted to point out that a lot of the artwork here, so I'm going to jump back over to Chrome, this is all done through SVGs. And there's a joke on the Compressed FM podcast that I'm an SVG snob, but the reason that I like it is I'm able to change the colors within the code, and I can also scale the images up or down without having to worry about how it affects the quality of the image. Plus, it will also respect the aspect ratio, so I don't have to worry about my images getting distorted. The other interesting thing is that the file sizes are actually smaller than if I had exported this out as, say, a ping. So I really like that. All of the artwork was created within Figma, and then I just exported it directly out of Figma. The other nice thing is we looked at the advent of JavaScript page, and you noticed, as I pointed out, that a lot of these components are the same. So even where I had SVG images, I was quickly able to change the colors within the code and really just changing the entire theme of the site through code. Let's just take a look at this. You'll notice that this is actually text. So if I pull up my developer tools in Chrome, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so that it's easier to see. And I'm going to inspect this block. So you can see that this is an H1. So that's valuable because I'm able to get some SEO value out of it. But then if you look at this div class, I'm going to go over to computed so you can see all the styles and properties that are being applied. But here I have a transform property. So I'm going to click on this arrow, and that will take me to that definition within the code. And you'll see that I have a transform skew Y value. So I can actually get that slant directly within CSS. So if I modify this value, you can see I can make that skew bigger, lean to the left, lean to the right. So that is pretty cool that you can do all that within just CSS as itself. Let's jump back over to the code, and I wanted to point out the snow since we had talked about that earlier. So I'm going to pull up my snow component here. Now at the top, you'll see that I am importing 10 SVGs, and these are all the snowflakes that are appearing on the site. And then as you scroll down, I'm using this Svelte each tag to create an array. So that's a quick way to create an array of 5 items. And then I'm going to loop over those. So I have each of these snowflakes listed here. And so because I have those 10 snowflakes and I'm looping over it 5 times, that means I have 50 flakes of snow on the site. And you can do all of this through JavaScript, but because this is the advent of CSS, I really felt like I need to create snow within CSS. So here it's using Sass. I have a link to the reference for the code that I'm actually pulling from where I borrowed stuff from, but they provided a bunch of different variables for physics that you could use to change how the snow is being displayed on the site. So you can offset it, you can add some wind. It also had the ability to make it 3D. So if we come down here, you can see I actually cut that code out or commented it out because with the style of the site, I wanted the snow to be flat, to be 2D to match the artwork. So what's happening here is you can see that this is creating the snow. It's in a fixed position. And at the beginning, it's putting all of that snow in the top left corner. If we come on down here, you'll see that this is all Sass. And what it's doing is it's looping over all of the snow. So I have a count variable. And again, that's being referenced here at the top. So I have 50 flakes of snow for those 50 flakes that we injected above. And then if I come on down, you can see that it creates a couple of references to those physics properties that were being controlled, but really the magic is right here. So I'm dynamically creating a starting point and an ending point, and then it will animate the snow from the starting point to the ending point, and it's all done with these variables. I'm going to close that out, and let's jump over to my bundle tier.svelte file. And I wanted to point this out because I'm actually using the same CSS between these 3 tiers here. I'm referencing these. So if I come back over to VS Code, and actually let's just pull this up too. I can right click on here and say reveal in the Explorer view. So you can see I have a bundle tier, a free tier, and a solution tier, but I have a single bundle.sass file. And this allows me to use similar styles between these 3 components. And so the way that this is being referenced is here at the top, I'm importing that Sass file, and then I reference a different background image since that is different between those 3 files. So it's nice I'm able to share that Sass between those 3 files, since a lot of times the Sass that you're writing for an individual Svelte component is limited to that component. So in this case, I need to be able to share it across, and you can do that by externaling those styles. Okay, let's jump over to the content because I think this is really exciting too. So here within the source folder, I have another folder called content and a subfolder called FAQs. And this is where all the FAQ content is coming from. I have a .markdown.md file for each of the FAQs that are on the site. And you'll see at the top, I have a front matter section that has a question and then the order that that question should appear in. So it's really nice that I can quickly add a markdown file and that will add the FAQ. It also made it really easy if there were typos, and unfortunately there were, but people could create a pull request to update that text if necessary. So the way that this gets pulled in is, as I mentioned, I'm using MD-Specs. But if you jump over to the routes folder, I have an FAQs folder, and I created a FAQs.json file. So this is actually available within the browser. So if I come over to Chrome, and let's just add on the end of this FAQs/FAQs.json, you can see that it was a recent file. Here is all of my content. So I have the HTML, and that has the answer. I have a question and then the order here. And the way that that file is getting generated, so if we come back over to VS Code, you'll see I have an underscore FAQs.ts file. So that underscore means that it shouldn't get rendered by itself. So just to prove a point, I'm going to come over to Chrome. If I type in /FAQs, I get a 404. Let's come back over to VS Code. So I have underscore.faqs. So here at the top, I'm defining the type of my FAQ. So I'm saying that I have a question that's a string. And then inside, I'm using glob eager to grab all of the FAQs within that particular file. So you can see that there's a wildcard, anything that has a .md extension on the end. And then here I am exporting out this function. And what this does is it loops over, so you can see there's map. It loops over all the files, the modules that I grabbed. And here it takes the metadata, because I want that. That's the front matter that we looked at. And then I'm also grabbing the HTML and I'm rendering that out. And I'm returning that within this object here. Then within my FAQs.json file, I'm importing that particular file. I want to return a status of 200, assuming that it was successful. And I'm stringifying those FAQs that I grabbed from that file. And that's what makes it available. Now, if we look at my actual FAQs component, you can see where I'm pulling that in. So here at the top, I am saying on mount. So once this component actually mounts, I am pulling that URL. So that's the one that we looked at within the browser. And I'm fetching it. So I'm fetching that URL and I'm waiting for that response. So once I have it, I'm actually using this built-in JavaScript method called sort to sort all of the elements by that order front matter piece that we looked at. So the nice thing about sort is it can do some sorting by default, but you can also pass it a custom function where you say, I want it to compare the first element and the second element. So what this does is it says if the first element, its order front matter piece, is less than the second one that you're looking at, then return -1, which means that it should go before. If it's greater than, then it should go after. Otherwise, just return 0. So it does all that sorting for me. And then if we scroll on down, you can see that I'm looping over each of those using those Svelte tags to say for each element of data, let's go ahead and list that FAQ. So I have each element as its own FAQ component. So we can look at this and you can see that it's listed as a prop that's being imported. And I'm displaying the question. I have the FAQ.html to display the answer. And since I'm getting HTML, I want to make sure that that gets rendered out as HTML. And as I mentioned, if we come back over to Chrome, let me hit the back button and you can actually look at these FAQs down here. They are expanding and collapsing. So this is pretty easy. Again, within Svelte, is I have their built-in transition and I'm using this slide here. So I'm just importing that from the built-in transitions that I get with Svelte, and it is showing or hiding depending on if it's marked visible or not. So let's come back over to Chrome. There's just a few more things that I wanted to point out within this project. So if we go up to the top, I have these sign me up or yes please buttons, and the payments are all being taken through Gumroad. So Gumroad makes this super easy. You can just create a product and it will give you a piece of JavaScript that you can use and add to your file to pull up these particular pieces. So I can have those embedded right on the page. So all I had to do there was drop in the code that Gumroad gave me. The last little tip and trick that I wanted to draw your attention to is within the footer. So my footer.svelte file. Here I'm pulling in a constants file for all of my variables. So this is a neat little trick. If I go over to my utils, I create a constants.ts file. And here I created an object for all of the social media links that I wanted to pull from. So you'll see that that's all caps, and that's just a convention to let someone know that it is a constant. And then I'm actually freezing that particular object. So that's saying I don't want that to be modified now that it's been created. I'm exporting that out, and then within the footer, I can simply import that. Then I'm referencing here. So as long as that value is available, then it's displaying that information. So I think that's everything that I wanted to point out. So hopefully you found that helpful. If you're interested in more Svelte and SvelteKit things, James and I are working on a course together called Everything Svelte. So you can go to everythingsvelte.com. It is already open for pre-sales, and right now it is 40% off what the price will be when we launch. So be sure to check it out. It was another fun landing page to put together, and it's using a lot of the same techniques that we talked about today. Again, special thanks to Brittany for having me on.
Have to unmute us there. There we go. Welcome back, everyone. What did we think? I thought that was amazing. I love seeing all the CSS tips and tricks in there too. That's my favorite. Oh no, Amy's
I'll
having a
fix
little bit
it.
of issues with her camera. StreamYard doesn't, I don't know, it's finicky sometimes.
Oh, funny. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, you're good. So
Yeah,
I mentioned the Everything Svelte site. If you go there, there's a cat with laser eyes, and if you scroll down to the bottom, I threw in a few little Easter eggs. So there's like a little window that pops up, and you can say, like it says, "Oh, I think you're cool," or something like that, and you click OK. The window will go away, and then it'll come back up, and it'll randomly
there's the
mix
link
the
for everyone.
icons. Yeah, there's
Right here.
it'll randomly mix the icons and the sayings and things like that. So all that's done within Svelte as well.
I'm going to see if I could actually demo that. Svelte.com. I have to do some playing around with my screen for a second.
I didn't give you any forewarning.
That's okay. Share screen. What in the world?
There we go.
StreamYard just completely, like, Chrome just crashed.
Oh, weird.
StreamYard has given us some fun times today. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
gonna let me. I might try it one more time, and if I crash, then we'll just do some Q&A. Let's see, share screen.
It looks like StreamYard. I was checking the comments. I appreciate that, Andrew. So
It did not work again,
it
so
did
I'm
not
just
work.
not gonna do that. I was gonna demo the
All
Everything
good.
Svelte site, but it is a super cool site. It's like
Oh,
throwback to
thank
the
you.
90s. I love it.
It was fun to put together. I felt like I was putting my childhood together.
Yes, it is. It does feel like that when you're on the site and playing, and looking for all those Easter eggs is really fun. So I'm super excited for that course to come out, and I don't know if I missed it. Did you say when that's coming out?
I did not say specifically. So if you go to the site, it says that it's launching spring 2022, but it will probably be in June. So we're probably going to leak into the summer. And part of the reason why is because James has been working directly with Supabase, and Supabase has been reworking all of their auth components. And so he's trying to make sure that we have all of the latest and greatest within the course. So we had talked about, well, maybe we should just go ahead and push it live, but then that would put a shelf life of like probably 2 weeks on the course. Whereas if we push it back just a couple more weeks, we can include all of those new features within the
That
course. So we figured that was
actually
worth it.
makes a ton of sense, and it gives SvelteKit time to become 1.0, so you don't have any SvelteKit stuff either, right?
Yes,
Like,
yes.
I've
So
had that
hopefully that'll
trouble, like,
be
I did a little intro course to SvelteKit, and I've had to re-record one video, like, twice because something's changed. It's like,
yeah,
"No, just stabilize." I'm hoping soon. We have
yes.
Svelte Summit coming up in a couple of weeks, so come
Awesome.
and join that and watch everything. And I know we have Tomas from Cloudinary coming in 2 weeks for a Svelte Sirens talk. I'm very
That's
excited about that
awesome.
as well.
Yeah.
Were there any questions? I don't know if I missed anything in the chat. Does anyone want to ask Amy anything before we go? Thank you, Andrew. Andrew says that was awesome. It was
Appreciate
very
that.
awesome to see, like, in depth how you do those sites. You're just such a great designer.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I would say, because James is like told me before, and the reason I'm mentioning James is James and I co-host a podcast called Compressed FM. We've had Brittany on before, but he's said that, people usually don't style sites like that. It's more of straightforward things. And I would say if there is a site that you want to style that's more, say, complicated, you style it the same way. Just take it one element at a time, place that one thing, and move on. So there's longer CSS files, but the process is still the same.
Yep. It's like doing anything in your life. If you take things one step at a time and just break them into
Mhm.
tiny, doable chunks, I feel like that's
Yes.
how you can get things done.
Yes, for sure.
Definitely. All right. I don't see any questions. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you so much, Amy, for doing this. I appreciate it. Hopefully, we can have you back on again in a few months, maybe after everything
I love
Spelt
that.
comes out. Give us a little sneak peek of that.
Sure. Would love that.
All right. We'll see y'all later. Thanks.